Hi, Gentry.
Hey, good morning, Abby. Our next guest has built her career speaking the truth with grace under fire. She went from the White House press room to the CNN primetime lights. She's the steady voice we turn to when politics gets loud. And now she's diving deep into history with her new book, A Dream Deferred, where she's exploring the life and legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson. She's the calmest and coolest in cable news. Let's hear it for Abby Phillip. Good morning, Abby.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So in the book, you tell this story about how Reverend Jackson and his campaign basically builds this blueprint that the Democrats are still using today. What part do you think that Reverend Jackson's playbook, what part of it do you think these modern leaders are really relying on most?
Yeah, I think there's several political figures that I think are directly out of the Jesse Jackson playbook, and they're the ones who are running on this economic populist message of, just talking to people about their day-to-day lives and the way in which, frankly, the system isn't working for them. Jesse Jackson, I think the best way to think about him was that he was the ultimate outsider candidate. He had not run for politics, for a political position before. He was somebody that everybody discounted, and he came in second place in the 1988 primary. And so the outsider coming in to disrupt the system on behalf of regular Americans, that's a theme that we're seeing in a lot of politicians, like the Bernie Sanders of the world, like AOC and Zohran Mamdani, who I think now have kind of, they've joined forces now in this New York City mayoral race. But those are the themes that I think he really focused on. But also, when you look at the Democratic Party today, it's a diverse, multiracial, multi-ethnic, it's all the different people. And that's partly of Jesse Jackson's creation. He went out there and registered all those voters and brought them into the Democratic Party. And that is one of the reasons that the Democratic Party looks the way that it looks today.
One thing I always respected about Reverend Jackson is even though he saw segregation firsthand, he couldn't even swim in the same pools as the white kids. To me, he never became bitter. I mean, do you think he turned that anger into positive energy instead of the hate? And how can that be taught more?
It's such a good point that, I mean, he was always somebody who was talking to the people that other people didn't want to talk to. He went into the Deep South. He went back to Selma when he was running for president and met with a political elected leader down there who had been one of the state troopers beating civil rights activists. And he talked to him and gave speeches in the Alabama State House and was always talking to the people who maybe 10 years ago would have thought of him as less than human. And I think that is a theme in his campaign, was that he went to the places that people would have told him he was unwelcome. He spoke at Farm Aid, the big concert that was there to raise money for American farmers. He was in Missouri and rural Iowa. He always went to the places where even other Democrats wouldn't go. And I think that is something that people don't know very much about Jesse Jackson. I think they definitely think of him as somebody who only spoke for and to Black people. But in those campaigns, that's not really what happened. He spent a lot of time talking to every type of American that you could possibly imagine.
And he really wasn't the establishment's pick either. He kind of had to
Not at
make
all.
the establishment adjust. Do you find any similarities at all with President Trump in the way outsiders? He's kind of an outsider, and he forced his way into the party. Is there a similarity there with Reverend Jackson and Trump?
Very much so in my mind. I mean, and don't get me wrong, politically, they have nothing in common. But in terms of who they were, their celebrity factor, their use of the media, and the fact that they tried to burst into the system from the outside without virtually any establishment support. That's essentially what Jesse Jackson tried to do, and he failed for a number of reasons. I think one of which was the fact that he was a Black man in the '80s, but he tried to do first what Donald Trump did in 2016, and people don't remember, I think, as much now because so much time has passed. But in the '80s, he was a massive celebrity. And he was, kind of somebody who was always around, always on television, always in the public eye, in culture, in politics, all kinds of different realms. And just like Trump, he used that celebrity to get farther than all these other establishment figures could get. I mean, Joe Biden ran for president in 1988, and he didn't even get to the primaries. He was a sitting United States senator. But Jesse Jackson was able to get all the way to the convention, basically, partly on the power of his charisma and his celebrity, and on this message that kind of broke through more than I think most establishment figures thought that it would.
We're with CNN's Abby Phillip. You know her from Newsnight on CNN. We're talking about her powerful new book. It's called A Dream Deferred, and we're diving into the life and legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson and how it really changed Black political power. And when I was doing my research, Abby, I realized that he had that remark in 1984 that he got hammered for, and his relationship with the Jewish American voters, which he denied this at first. It strikes me, though, that Democrats and Republicans alike, this is one thing that they agree upon. You cannot question U.S. policy or support for Israel. It's almost politically unspeakable. And that seemed to be the case for Jesse Jackson. Now, was there ever proof that he made those comments? And why is it mentioning anything about Israel policy immediately is bad news for Democrats and Republicans?
Well, I think that there are two aspects of this. And the first is that eventually acknowledged that he made those comments. It wasn't recorded, but it was said in private, and he thought he was off the record with some reporters, and it ended up being a newspaper. And he eventually apologized for it. And I think that that was a lesson for him in dealing. It was a crisis management kind of situation where his instinct was to say, "I didn't say it," but then he ultimately had to own up to it, and eventually gave a speech, apologizing for it. And I think had he done that earlier and more forcefully, he might have been able to get past it. But separate from that, he was already on thin ice because, to your point, I mean, I think this has always been the third rail in American politics. And it was even more so then than it is now, because back then it was not okay to even really talk about Palestinians. I mean, the US government policy was not to even speak to the Palestinian leaders at the time who were considered terrorists. And because of that, when Jesse Jackson said that we should be seeking a two-state solution back in the 80s, that was not a thing. And it wasn't until later in the 90s and beyond that it became part of US policy. But you just have to remember that that was a different time. And he was a little ahead of his time in that respect. And it did not help him when he was trying to get past this crisis that he faced in terms of the Town remarks. The other thing, though, is that by speaking to this issue, he brought Arab Americans into the political process in a way that they had not been brought into the process before. And that's a legacy that I think still sticks with that community, that so many other politicians didn't want to hear anything from them, even though they were Americans. And Jesse Jackson said to them, you're part of this system too. We want your vote. And I think they remember that very fondly. And I think it's a lasting legacy of his.
Well, I'd like to congratulate you on the success of Newsnight. You've already brought new energy to that show. And CNN, to be honest, is very lucky to have you because I've seen the growth over the last couple of years. And it's clear you're building something special at 10 o'clock on CNN with Newsnight. So if you haven't watched it, whether you're Republican or Democrat, this is one thing I appreciate about you is you're giving a voice to all sides. You're the calm, collected voice when it gets heated in the middle. And I think America is craving that right now and hearing a real debate. How important is that to you that both sides get this fair voice on your show?
It is very important. I mean, I think that is what we try to do every night. And I know that in this day and age, a lot of people don't really care for debate. They just don't want to hear it. But I am making the case, and we are making the case on Newsnight that it is worth knowing what other people think, that we are living in this country together and we should be talking to each other, not past each other. And we don't always, I mean, honestly, we don't most of the time end with people holding hands and singing Kumbaya. But at least for the first time, for 1 hour at night, people really hear what it sounds like when ideas are challenged, when you hear the other side to a point of view. And I think that is so important for our democracy. And I'm really grateful that we get to do it. And I think that at the end of the day, it might not be for everyone. Maybe you need to, take a break from the back and forth of politics. That's okay. But I also think that just remember that one of the things that makes us a democracy is that we can debate. We're free to do it. And we have to insist on that because that's the future of keeping this democracy alive. When we don't talk to each other, we get more further and further apart, and we can't convince each other anymore to come over to our side on certain issues, even if we don't agree on everything. So that's what we do, and I really enjoy it. It's also fun. I mean, it's an interesting show. You never really know what's going to be said. And I think people who come on the show get very surprised by the range of points of view that we have because it's not just Democrat and Republican. We have people who are everything in between, and that makes it really interesting and kind of dynamic.
Well, you have a lot of courage, and I hope that you have good security on set because people do get fired up about this stuff. So we're talking with Abby Phillip. She's the host of Newsnight. She's also got a brand new book out, A Dream Deferred. She takes us to the inside of Jesse Jackson's historical presidential run. What's something that most people don't know about Jesse Jackson? Something that's made him human to you?
Yeah. I think most people don't think about how much of his life since he was in his early 20s, he was um, at just physical peril. I mean, he came out of a movement where people were getting assassinated left and right. And I think he lived practically his entire life with the fear of not living to be where he is today, 84 years old. And that is such a strange thing to think about, but he has lived this long. And I think that's one of the reasons that it was important to kind of take another look at him and his legacy because so many others of his generation didn't get to live to be 84. And what it's like to spend so much of your life. He only had Secret Service protection when he was running for president, but all the rest of his life, he was just out there with that risk hanging over his head. His family lived with that trauma. And I think that's something that I don't think people give him enough credit for, the willingness to put himself out there in order to do the things that he did.
You've studied Jesse Jackson. You've studied many politicians. Jesse, a man who used his microphone to move mountains. You have a powerful microphone, Abby. Every night you're on CNN. Do you ever think about what it would look like if you were the voice on the campaign trail instead of behind the news desk? Have you ever thought of that? Because I
I
could see you as the next president, Abby.
No, I can just tell you that is not my ministry. I do not truly. I mean, I came into journalism because I think politicians need people to hold them accountable. I think there are other people who want to do that, but my job is to actually speak for regular people who are kind of just wondering why is everything so screwed up? And why are these people lying so much and why and it's like basic stuff like that and sometimes we have to channel that for them because they can't be in the room to ask the question, and I think that's a really important responsibility. It is in a way just as important as being a political figure. It's a different part of the political system, and I've always known that this is the part that I would prefer to be a part of. I'll save the politics for other people, but I chose to be more of a voice for people rather than being, in politics itself. And I'm really grateful for the job that I have, and I love it.
You'll get less gray hair because of it. So that's
I don't know,
probably
or maybe more. I mean, maybe
yeah, we'll
more,
see. Yeah,
honestly.
especially in your position on Newsnight, it gets.
These
But
last
hey,
10 years have been rough. So
so when you're not chasing headlines, Abby, what people I know they see you on television, you talk a lot of politics, but I don't know if people really know what are you into. What is your ideal like lazy Sunday for Abby Phillip?
yeah, I'm really into baking and cooking, and I love to entertain. I love just sort of, in a way, actually, maybe this is why I love my show that I do right now because it feels a little bit like a dinner party. I love a good dinner party with like six or seven people. And I think that I also, I mean, I'm always in the kitchen because I feel like food is a way to sort of make bring people together, make them feel at home, just kind of to share part of yourself with other people. And it brings me joy. It takes me away from the day-to-day grind of politics and the news. And I bake a lot of sourdough bread when I have the chance. So anytime I have a free day, that's what I'm doing usually.
Well, let's make sure that there's no food fights in the studio there at CNN. Keep the food
Well, we're
fights.
at the Food Network Friday nights, so we break bread together on Friday nights after all the debates happen.
Well, thanks for breaking bread with me, Abby. I'm a huge fan. I watch you most every night on Newsnight on CNN, and I'm definitely getting inside this new book called A Dream Deferred that takes us deep inside Jesse Jackson's historical run in the 80s and his presidential campaigns and that movement that really shaped American politics. So great job by you. So much heart, so much faith and perspective on today's show. And God bless you, Abby. We'll keep watching you on television. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gentry. Nice talking to you.
Download it wherever you get your podcasts.